Before long, the group would have arrived to Tokyo. As they made their way into the city, it seemed as though they had gone from day to night in an instant. A sky completely devoid of all light, nothing but darkness surrounding them. Issei, Rainier, Asia, Rias, Akino, Koniko, Rosvisa, Zenobia, Irina, Vali, Biko, Arthur, Kuroka, and Soso all entered into the city together. As the people were evacuating and making their way out, as the weather seemed to change constantly, strong winds swirling all around them. They could see off into the distance a light starting to shine. And before they knew it, it seemed as though a dome of energy had surrounded the city altogether. They felt as though all time seemed to have been cut off and erased in that moment. And it became clear to all of them what was going to happen. Soso would explain that this was a time bubble of sorts. In all likelihood, they were using Gasper as a way to cloak off the entire city, to keep anyone else from getting in or getting out. Thankfully, the city had been evacuated in time, leaving them as the only ones that remained. This now meant that this would be the ground zero from which they would begin their plans. In all likelihood, they were going to use Yasuka as a beacon, as a way to create a door between their world and the dark dimension. They knew that before long they would have to engage with the enemy, knowing that this could very well be their last fight. As Issei was mentally preparing himself, he would be stopped as Rainier walked over to him. The two had spoken for some time since Issei returned from the dead, although he could feel that things were definitely starting to change between them. If things had been different, if this had been an alternate time, Issei wondered if they would have been where they were today. Originally, he saw Rainier as his enemy, and he wanted to kill her for everything she had done. But he gave her a chance, and now she had changed. And as for Rainier, she wondered if she truly deserved this life. To be honest, she herself knew she deserved death for everything that she had done, whether she knew it subconsciously or not. But Issei spared her life and gave her another chance at living. She didn't want to waste this opportunity. As she got closer to him, she would tell him that she was grateful for everything he had done for her up until now, and she only hoped that they could survive this, so that they could be together in the future. Although Rainier was not the only one who shared those sentiments, Irina would also take her time with Issei as well as also Asia. The girls wanting to convey their feelings to him, to have one last chance to say the things that they wished to say, if this were to truly be the end for them all. Issei made his peace, but there was one girl, one who seemed a bit nervous out of all of them. She had long flowing red hair, and her name was Rias Gremory. Just before they were preparing to head out, Issei would pull Rias over to the side. He finally asked her why she was wearing that eye patch on her left eye, the eye that had been damaged in the fight with Riser Phoenix during their raiding game all that time ago. Rias never thought that Issei would ask such a question, but she would answer. The reason why she kept her eye covered up was because the damage that had been done, she felt as though she wouldn't look as beautiful as she once did. And she worried that if he saw her the way that she did, then he might not like what he saw. However, Issei would pull her over to where no one could see them, and he slowly would remove the eye patch to see into her eye. As he looked into it, Rias became very self-conscious, but he quickly put it back on and assured her that there was nothing wrong with it. In fact, he found scars rather beautiful, since scars told a story. This scar was a symbol of her determination, of the fact that she fought until the very end and did not give up. All the same, Rias was still a bit unsure, worried about what the future might hold for them. However, he promised that when things were over, they were going to go back to the way it used to be. Before leaving though, Rias would ask if Issei would mind taking her with him, wherever he went in life. And Issei promised that she could ride with him anytime. In the center of the city, in its tallest tower, Blackheart, along with Nightmare and Lilith, the three would begin the ceremony. First, they would use the Necronomicon, and they would summon the army of Deadites to begin their assault. As Issei and his team stood at the ready, everyone powering up their latent abilities as the army of the dead came after them. They would move forward as the Battle of Tokyo would begin. Issei, Irina, and Vali would take the front, using their powers, the Red Dragon Empress and the White Dragon Emperor, donning their balance breaker armor. The Angel and the Devil, blasting their way through the army of Deadites, as the Ghost Rider Issei would blaze through, shooting out a tremendous amount of hellfire, burning through them. With everyone else bringing up the rear, they would all battle and work together as one. As they looked off in the distance, they could see a giant nine-tailed fox starting to form. And from above, even amongst the darkness, a small portal would begin to open. Soso would warn that they were starting the ceremony, and at this rate, it would only be by a matter of time before the portal was fully opened. It would have to be opened completely for the rest of the Dark Ones to come out. But even partially opened, other creatures could start to appear into their world. The larger the portal, the more dangerous they would become. It could be seen as a filter that was slowly starting to open more and more as time passed. Even if they had time to spare, they needed to reduce as much damage as possible. Afterwards, Issei would decide to move on ahead with Irina and Vali, Rias telling Issei that everyone else could hold things down against the Deadites here, but that they had to go and stop the main threat at the source. Issei nodded as he was preparing to leave. However, before he could do so, Rainier would rush over to him, grabbing him and kissing him, telling him to come back. The other girls would watch on, a little jealous in that moment, but they were too busy fighting to do anything. But they still shared the same sentiment, for Issei to return. With that, Issei would summon his car forth, as he entered inside of the black skyline, the tires now setting ablaze on fire. Both Irina and Vali would fly into the air, Irina being carried by her angel wings, and Vali by the wings of the White Dragon Emperor, as well as his devil wings. They would fly through, blasting away at the Deadites, while Issei mowed them down with his car. The front of the hood emitting great amounts of fire, burning away at them and running them down as the three continued their way to the tower. Eventually they would arrive. As they made their way up, they would see the Ninetales in anguish. So would tell them that they needed to break away the seal she was connected to in order to free her. However, there was an obstacle standing in their way. A pale man with dark hair and a dark green suit. The one known as Nightmare. A woman with short black hair. Someone who seemed as though she were the opposite of Lady Mephisto. And Lilith. And then finally the one at the center of it all. A young man in a black suit with short black hair. As he walked forward, and Issei did the same, he would have a joyous smile on his face. Issei Hyodo. So, it seems you've come back from the dead. This makes me really happy. You don't break so easily. Not like father or mother. I do hope you will provide me some entertainment before the next dark age begins. I know what you truly are, Blackheart. You are one of the Dark Ones, one of the 7 soulless demons of the Dark Dimension. You used the body of Nicholas Blaze to return back to this world, to enact your sinister schemes. So you finally figured it out, huh? Well, I don't blame you. But you are correct. I am one of the 7 Dark Lords. And what will you do with this information? Even if you know what I am, you still are not strong enough to stop me. I beg to differ. I am not going to let you or your brethren return to this world. I am going to stop you here and now. And I am going to free Nicholas from your control. You will try. You will try. And I look forward to seeing you do so. If you think you have the power to stop me, then show me what you got, Ghost Rider. Issei entered into his Ghost Rider state, and Blackheart into his monstrous demon form. As Issei lunged at him, the two of them went flying straight off the side of the tower before crashing into the ground. Both of them standing back on their feet, but neither one giving an inch. While Volley and Irina wished they could have had their chance at Blackheart, they knew what was important for them to do at the moment. Volley set his sights on the Master of Shadows and Nightmare, and the two of them would begin their battle, while Irina would enter into her Battle Angel mode, Red Dragon Empress, Ace Angel. Using a holy spear of light powered by the dragon, she would engage with Lilith. Their battles taking place separately all throughout the tower itself. While meanwhile, Rias and the others would still be holding their own against the Deadites, everyone using their powers to the fullest extent. Rias, in the center of it all, was channeling her energies. She knew what she needed to do, and after encouragement from Issei, she felt as though now she could finally reveal and be her true self. She would remove the eye patch from her eye. There would be a scar that would run from the top of her left eyebrow down to her cheek. But as she opened her eye, everyone would see what she was truly hiding. Rias's left eye was entirely black, with a crimson-red pupil. However, a red aura would form around her, causing the ground to shake and tremble. Everyone stopped and backed away at that moment, standing behind Rias and guarding her, as she held her hands to the sky. Infinity, crimson rain, ash of destruction. Multiple red, crimson, magical seals would appear in the air, and from them, torrents of crimson lightning, the power of destruction itself, would rain down upon the army of the Deadites, burning them to cinder and completely destroying them to ash. This was the power that the Grimmery family were known for, the true power of destruction, from which there is no revival. Rias continued her torment, continued to rain down her energies, destroying and wiping away at many of the armed forces surrounding them. However, she was not the only one using her power to the fullest extent. Rainier showed off the true mastery of her holy constructs, as she formed energies of light, multiple light spears. She launched them towards the Deadites with quick and orderly fashion, her constructs becoming stronger and stronger as they fed upon her emotions. Both Koneko and Kuroka would enter into their Neko Sage modes. Using their chi, they would manipulate the earth around them, destroying multiple pockets of Deadites all at once. Biko and Soso, their mastery in the art of spear fighting, would move about the battlefield swiftly and gracefully, swiping away at their enemies. Asya would be at the rear, healing everyone when possible. Using Twilight Healing, she could heal multiple people at once. Both Zenobia and Kiba would slice away at the army using their swords. Kiba with the Holy Devil Sword, and Zenobia with Ex Durandal, using the power of all of the Holy Swords at once. They were holding their own against the Deadites and striking them down greatly. Rosvisa, with the power of the Valkyrie by her side, would launch her assaults from the air with the power of the Rook at her full disposal. In the meantime, both Issei and Blackheart would continue their battle on the ground. As they continued to fight, it seemed as though Blackheart could no longer bully around Issei like he used to. For every punch he gave, Issei gave one just as hard. But it wasn't his fists that were doing the most damage. It was actually Issei's words that were truly reaching him. "What's the matter, Blackheart? Is that all you can give me?" "You talk a big game, Issei, but we both know you still don't have the strength to match me." "You say that, but we both know you used to hit a lot harder. What's the matter? Nicholas still holding you back?" "Shut it! Don't get mad at me. You're supposed to be the big bad demon, yet you can't overtake a little boy's subconscious? I guess the Dark Ones really aren't as powerful as you thought you were." Blackheart became more and more annoyed every time Issei spoke. It threw off his concentration. It would be but for a split second. However, that split second was all that Issei needed, as he would come rocketing with his fist once again. Issei then decided it was time to get down to business, as he pulled out his shotgun as well as his bone dagger. He would blast at Blackheart in the chest, the composited forms of hellfire doing even more damage than before, stunning him long enough for Issei to move in with the slash of his blade, cutting him in the chest multiple times. Blackheart would fall to the ground in pain. However, he still felt as though he had the advantage, and he knew it. Eventually he got close enough to Issei, grabbing him by both of his wrists, snapping the bone-like being, as both the gun and the dagger would fall from his hands. He would hold Issei and headbutt him over and over again, until his skull began to crack and hellfire began to spring out. Issei yelled in pain as he was slammed into the ground before being thrown into the side of a building. However, his regenerative power was even greater than it once was. And just as Blackheart went in to continue the damage, Issei would come tumbling out, with another right hook landing right into his face, knocking him back. Blackheart could feel the toll that the fight was taking on him. As much as he didn't want to admit it, Issei truly was holding his own against him. He couldn't even believe it at this point in time. After everything that they had been through, how was he still getting this strong? Was the boy really holding him back? Did he not have complete control over his own body? Over his domain? He didn't even have enough time to wonder, as Issei continued to rain down the punishment. Issei grabbed him by the tail and lifted him into the air before slamming him back into the ground once again, leaving him in a massive crater. Issei would undo the chain around his waist, wrapping it around his right hand. He would mount on top of Blackheart, raining down his right fist, covered in hellfire, upon him, bashing his face into the ground over and over, not relenting, not giving up for a moment. He channeled his infinite power into his body. It seemed as though he were delivering 1,000 punches a second. The cracks could be heard across the sky itself. Blackheart could feel that he was slowly losing the advantage. Issei was getting more and more confident as the fight dragged on, and he couldn't allow for this. He reversed the attack before now taking the upper hand, as he started to rain down his own punches upon Issei. He did so relentlessly, without stopping for a moment. Now, a good fight was something he didn't care for. The only thing that he had on his mind was murder. He wanted to kill Issei at this point in time, and there was nothing that was going to stop him. As Issei felt the fist connecting to his face, he would see flashes of images in his mind. He saw Irina. He saw Rainier. He saw all of his friends and everyone that he cared for. He saw Lady Mephisto. He would see visions and images of their deaths, excruciating and horrifying. What he witnessed was hell on earth in that moment, a future he did not want. As the punches continued to rain down upon him, he felt his subconscious slowly sinking into the darkness. That was until he felt something push him forward. A great force. He felt as though it was something that were loving. Something that was bright and hopeful. A force that could pull him out of the darkness. It gave him the ability to hold on, to not slip away, but to continue pressing forward. As he did so, the flame around his skull would slowly begin to morph and change. from its bright orangey hue to that of a dark crimson. As the crimson flame took over, Issei felt himself being reinvigorated once again. Blackheart continued to punch desperately, hoping to end him once and for all, until Issei caught the final punch, as he delivered one of his own, knocking him away. Blackheart would be disoriented, but he would slowly get back on his feet once again. However, as he did so, he would look to see that Issei was standing, but it appeared as though he was not alone. If one did not know any better, it looked as if there were 1,000 lights of fire standing behind Issei, and within each of that fire stood a Ghost Rider. All of the riders that had come before him, all who would ever be, and for those who would come after. They all stood behind Issei as his eyes glowed. Blackheart, you and your wickedness will not go unpunished. I am the spirit of vengeance. I am the one who delivers the justice. I am the one who will repay. I settle the score, because vengeance is mine. You will answer for your sins, and I am your reaper. I am the Ghost Rider. I am vengeance. Issei would be swallowed in the light of the crimson flame, as now the final stages of the battle were about to begin. The Crimson Rider versus the Soulless Demon. As the final stages of Issei and Blackheart's battle was beginning, all across Tokyo, most of the Deadites were now being defeated. And with that, the others would make their way to where Gasper and Yasuka were. Once they had arrived, they found where the two were being held. Gasper thankfully had recovered consciousness, although he was immensely scared of where he was. Although thankfully they had the strength to free him, and Yasuka as well. Asuya, using her healing power, she was able to revert her back to what she used to be, thankfully regaining herself. Even still, despite freeing them, the portal still hovered over the city. In order to stop it, Blackheart needed to be defeated once and for all. Both Irina and Vali were holding their own in their fights against both Nightmare and Lilith. Thankfully though, the dome over the city had been released, allowing for anyone to come in and out once again. And two beings in particular arrived. As Vali was fighting off against Nightmare, he would receive help from an unlikely of source. Danny Ketch, former Ghost Rider, arriving in the nick of time. He and Nightmare had many battles in the past, and he was looking forward to finishing it here and now. As with Irina, as she was holding her own against Lilith, Lilith would suddenly be blasted from the sky. As Irina looked to see where it come from, standing next to her would be none other than Lady Mephisto, looking to settle the score with her sister once and for all. In doing so, their combined power was enough to defeat the two, imprisoning them to be dealt with at a later date and time. But everyone turned their attention to the final battle between both Issei and Blackheart. The two now fighting in the middle of the city. Destruction everywhere and abundant. The Crimson Ghost Rider Issei Hyodo. His strength was now on a level of which none had ever seen. Blackheart was being dealt damage left and right. Despite everything he threw at Issei, it didn't seem to be enough, and now he was on the back foot. At that moment, Blackheart felt something that he had never felt before in his life. He felt fear. Fear because now, for the first time, he was in a fight that he could actually lose. And that fear was all that Issei needed. As he stared deep into the eyes of Blackheart, Blackheart could feel his fear growing. His fear was manifesting, like the embers of a flame starting to ignite. But how could he feel such fear? What was causing him to be afraid? What was causing him to feel these moments of weakness? Issei took advantage of the opportunity in front of him as he continued to lay on the pain, using his encompassing power to destroy Blackheart, to chip away at his invulnerability, until eventually he had taken the high ground. Blackheart desperately tried to fight back, but there was no use. He could feel as if there was something holding him back, and he knew deep down what it was. It was Nicholas Blaze himself. The young boy's spirit was not entirely gone from his body. There was just enough of him left to resist, to fight back, and it was giving Issei the opening that he needed. Everyone watched on and cheered for Issei, encouraging him to continue and to finish the fight. And Issei prepared to do so, as he plunged both of his fists deep inside of Blackheart's chest, igniting his hellfire inside of him to burn him from the inside out. However, Blackheart was not going to go down so easily. He created multiple black tendrils and spikes that pierced all through Issei's body. The two of them were now stuck in a deadlock. It was now a matter of who had the will to survive. The first one to let go, the first one to fall, that person would be the one who died. Issei continued to fuel his hellfire into his fist. Blackheart starting to burn from the inside out. Fire beginning to appear from inside of him, burning him from within. Blackheart yelled in excruciating pain, and so did Issei, the two sides not giving an inch to one another. As Blackheart tried one desperate time for a final push, he felt something stop him, as if something were holding him back, and he knew what it was. But sadly, this body was nothing more but a mere vessel, and no matter how strong he might have been, a vessel would only do but so much. His vessel was never truly his, and now it was finally rejecting him. He was losing his grip, his strength, as Issei made one final desperate push. He fueled as much of the crimson flame deep inside of Blackheart, until eventually Blackheart couldn't let out a guttural scream, fire emanating from his mouth and from his eye holes. He began to burn and to crumble away, his grip on this reality loosening as he found himself returning to the dark dimension. Blackheart would curse and scream at Issei Hyodo. He warned him that this would not be the end. He vowed that one day he and his brethren would return from the darkness. They would seek their vengeance upon this world, and he personally would destroy Issei Hyodo. As he screamed, the demonic form of Blackheart would burn away into ash, fading off into the air itself, as the portal above the city would close, and the darkness would slowly disappear, as light began to seep through and shine upon them all. Issei would finally untransform, falling to the ground, his clothes ripped and tattered, feeling beaten and bloodied, but alive. As everyone ran to him, both Rainier and Irina holding on to him extremely close. Issei being so close, in fact, that he felt a lot of woman in a lot of the soft and good areas. Issei had been fighting for so long that he had almost forgotten about his dream. The boy that once wanted to harem for his own. Of course, that dream never faded away or died. It was put on the back burner, so to speak. But for now, he was surrounded by people who truly loved and cared about him. And honestly, that was all that he could want. As the darkness faded, Azazel would arrive along with Sir Zex and a few of the other leaders. They would assess the situation, and they would be filled with immense pride to see that the children had managed to step up when needed, and they had managed to put an end to Blackheart and his schemes once and for all. However, everyone's attention would then be focused on Lady Mephisto, as she walked over to the body that was once the host of the demon Blackheart. She would kneel down and cradle the boy within her arms. Even though his eyes were closed and life had faded from him once again, this even brought the cold-hearted Lady Mephisto to tears. For although her son died, he died with a smile on his face. As she looked up to the sky above, if only for her, she saw the silhouette of Johnny Blaze and their son, Nicholas Blaze. The two of them smiling down upon her as they faded, their souls finally at peace. They had now been given a chance to be put to rest. Lady Mephisto would turn to Issei Hyodo as a single tear fell from her cheek. She would only say this: "Thank you, Issei, for freeing my son." Azazel and the other leaders would get to work in repairing Tokyo. Thankfully, they were able to do so within reasonable time, and it seemed as though the darkness that had befallen the city had never happened. Issei and the others would eventually return back to school, The Occult Research Club were now going to be hosting their own maid cafe for the school festival. For everyone, it seemed a bit anticlimactic. They had gone from possibly experiencing the dark apocalypse to now going back to doing school stuff. For Issei, he tried to settle down and readjust back to normal life, although now things were a bit more complicated than they used to be. Issei still lived in his large mansion, thankfully granted to him by Sir Zex and the others, and the girls were all happy. He was now taking time to relax, to get to know them all on a much more deeper basis, besides already knowing of Irina, Rainier, and Asia. But he took interest in Akano and Koniko. He even made time for Rias. The two of them having a very intense conversation. It was about Issei's position. Rias still had 4 pawns available. This was the offer for Issei to officially join the House of Grimmery. Of course, Issei had thought about it for some time. He didn't join originally because of his job and what he needed to do. But now, he didn't have that responsibility. But still, there was something he needed to take care of first. So he would have to decline. This gave Rias a little disappointment. But Issei walked over to her, giving her a kiss on the forehead. He told her to simply keep them stored. He was going to be using them someday, just not now. This gave her a reason for joy. And with that, she could wait. In the meantime, as the festivities and everything went on nicely, Issei would be called back to the underworld. As he arrived to the mansion of Lady Mephisto in her domain, he would stand before her as she granted him his freedom. He had fulfilled the request given to him. He reaped 99 of the most wicked souls on earth. And he defeated Blackheart and freed her son. With Issei now being given freedom, he was allowed to keep his Ghostwriter powers, since they were now one with him. But the title of the Spirit of Vengeance was something he could no longer lay claim to. He asked Lady Mephisto what she was going to do now. The world still needed a Ghostwriter, even if he no longer had the title of the Spirit of Vengeance. And she assured him that there was a candidate. In fact, Danny had already gone to meet him. He was a boy about the same age as Issei. He lived in America, in the state of New Mexico. A boy by the name of Robbie Reyes. He was going to be a fine suitor to be the next Spirit of Vengeance. And he had a thing for cars himself. Of course, he preferred American muscle, while Issei preferred the might of Japan itself. All the same, for Issei now to have his freedom, he wasn't sure what he was going to do now. He had this power, and he felt that there was still good that he could do with it. Maybe now was the time to finally join the House of Grimmery officially, to take the 4 remaining pawns. Of course, as he was debating all of this, a portal would suddenly open behind them. Both Lady Mephisto and Issei looking very warily and standing at the ready. As from out of it, a man would appear. He was dressed in a tan suit with a jacket, and on that jacket there were 3 letters: TVD. A. The man would introduce himself as Loki of Asgard. Lady Mephisto could sense that this was Loki, but this was not the Loki from their world. Issei was confused because the last time he remembered, Loki was imprisoned in Asgard. So how was he here? Loki would then explain that that was simply a variant, if you will. Although he had looked up this world's version of Loki, and he had to say he was rather unimpressed to think that a variant of him would be so stupid. All the same, Issei stood on his guard as he didn't trust Loki, no matter what kind they might be. However, this Loki had come for a much different reason. He came for a good cause. You see, there was trouble. The multiverse was collapsing. And he needed to put together a team. A team of special individuals who could join together to fight the oncoming threat. Issei asked who or what this threat was, and Loki told them it was a man known as Kang the Conqueror. Issei would then turn back to Lady Mephisto. She looked on, almost as if she knew this was going to happen. And with that, Issei would ask, was this the prophecy she spoke of? That Issei would join and become one of the seven that would save their reality. Was this what she meant by that? Lady Mephisto would only shake her head. If she went around telling every little thing, it may or may not come true. But now it made sense. Issei would then ask Loki, how many more people besides him was he going to recruit? And Loki would simply say that Issei was one of the seven. And now it basically confirmed that the prophecy was now coming to pass. This was his destiny, meaning that he still had one more mission that he needed to do. One last adventure before he could settle down with Rias and the others. He asked how long he would be gone, and Loki would explain that that was a rather complicated question. Where they were going, it wasn't going to be a matter of moving in and out of dimensions, but they would be moving across time, meaning that Issei could be in yesterday, he could be in tomorrow, he could be in the present, he could be anywhere and everywhere, but also nowhere. But Loki did make this one promise though. When everything was said and done, assuming they survived, he would bring him back right to this point in time, right where he took him. For Lady Mephisto, it will appear as if Issei never left. But for Issei, there's no telling how long he will have been gone. Believing that that made sense, and once he thought it over, he decided he would give it a try. As he turned back to Lady Mephisto, he would simply give her a nod, stating that he'll see her in a few minutes, as he chuckled with himself, as both he and Loki would disappear. The room would be empty. Lady Mephisto with an hourglass sitting at her table. She would flip it upside down as the sand would quickly spindle from the top to the bottom. This hourglass could tell time at any rate, but Lady Mephisto did it by a few minutes. Eventually, once the final grain of sand reached the bottom, a portal would open up once again, and Issei would stumble out. He was tired and exhausted. If Lady Mephisto didn't know any better, Issei looked as though he had been gone for months. However, for her, he was only gone for a few minutes at most. But for Issei, it had been so long since he had seen that room. As he sat down on the couch, Lady Mephisto would ask how long he had been gone. Issei would simply shake his head. He wasn't sure. He had been to so many places, traveled to so many timelines. But still, he was surprised, though. He asked if he had kept his word, and he asked how long was he gone. Lady Mephisto would confirm that in their world, Issei had only been gone for a few minutes. It was as if he had never left in the first place. And for that, Issei was thankful. It meant that he didn't have to worry about losing touch with anyone. Although he was going to need a long rest after everything he had been through. Lady Mephisto would ask, what did he see? Who did he meet? What was his story? Issei simply looked at her, befuddled, but a bit amazed, as he smiled. It's kind of a long story, but if I have to start anywhere, I guess I'll start where me and Loki first went. We went to another dimension, and we came across this strange land. A place called Konoha.